Welcome, everyone, to the Advanced Sports Analytics Podcast. It is April 14th. I'm here with Stewart Gibson. We're going to look at the NBA slate tonight. Stewart, why don't we start off with a quick recap of last night's slate? We'll keep it very brief. How did last night go for you?
It did not go well. I didn't really have any of Dort, who we kind of pinpointed as looking like a reasonably good minutes and usage play, and kind of scratching our heads as to why he wasn't showing through our side a little better projection. I think it was hard to project him taking 30 shot attempts, shooting 60+% from three. But so didn't have any Dort, or at least, I don't know, my best lineup didn't have any Dort. So I would guess that means I didn't have any Dort. Didn't have too much Caleb Martin. That hurt. Got some things right on the Utah side, with a little more exposure to Gobert than Mitchell, and plenty of Conley exposure. But yeah, it was kind of one of those nights where if you didn't have Dort, you didn't have much of a chance of putting together a tournament winning lineup, or even kind of a top 1 percentile. Got hurt there. I think it became an interesting slate. I mean, we had talked about yesterday, how to consider team limits and rules. And I think as we might have highlighted, like for me, there are kind of two heuristics that I'm considering: size of the slate. The smaller the slate, the more willing I'm going to be to roster 2 or even 3 guys from the same team, and just the value that becomes available, particularly at the high multiplier side. And I think yesterday we were kind of on the fence about whether capping team limits at 2 or 3 made sense. I thought by the time lock approached, once more Utah players got ruled out, once we had, I think, during the show, a lot of the Charlotte guys got ruled out. There just became immense value on the Utah and Charlotte side, such that I felt good about rostering 3 players from any of those teams. I wasn't going to, say roster exactly 3, but usually I'm capping team limits at 2 or 1 on a big slate like tonight. Last night, given the value that was available, given the size of the slate, I thought setting limits up to 3 for those 2 teams. I didn't want to set, 3-player limits on some of the other teams, but for Charlotte, for Utah, I thought that was the right decision. Charlotte obviously let down in a really big way. Not all of Charlotte did. I mean, Jalen McDaniels had a great game. Caleb Martin had a great game. But if you had ownership condensed around guys like Devontae Graham or Miles Bridges, Cody Zeller, you kind of were let down. And I think the Utah kind of groupings played out as we had discussed yesterday, before O'Neal and Ingles got ruled out. I think we were open to the idea of having a little bit of kind of elevated single lineup exposure to some of these Utah guys, but definitely with the rule of not having Gobert and Mitchell in the same lineup. That kind of came to fruition last night, where Gobert had a great game, put up a lot of blocks late, and Mitchell had a bit of a dud game. It's not really clear that, I don't know, you maybe could make the case that Mitchell lost some of his offensive opportunity to Conley, not Gobert. But nonetheless, we kind of discussed not wanting to roster all 3 of Gobert, Conley, Mitchell. And I think that logic kind of continues as we, move forward to some of these slates. Like when the value's there, I'm okay with rostering 2 or 3 guys from the same team, but I don't want to roster 2 players with low multipliers, or 3 players that collectively have a low multiplier, like the trio of Gobert, Conley, Mitchell would have had. I found a lot of my lineups having like 2 of Conley, Mitchell, Gobert, and then like Bogdanovich or Favors, who we didn't like on the show, but once some of those Utah forwards got ruled out, I thought kind of crept into play. Of course, he let down in a big way, but Georges Niang would have been the guy there. So if you had like Gobert, Conley, Niang, that's kind of how three Jazz players would have worked, and I think put together a tournament winning, score. So Yeah, that's kind of my synopsis of the slate last night. You have anything that you noticed? How did your approach change as some of the Utah news came out, as projections updated in response to the Charlotte injuries?
Yeah, I did like the idea of going a little contrarian for Utah. I hadn't think it could happen, but I did like the idea of looking for some unusual pieces. We mentioned that Dort was the difference maker. I'm not sure that's ever been true on any site. Dort has, I just can't remember him having any explosive games at OKC, but um, anyway, that was fascinating to have him go off completely. Um, so jumping into tonight's slate, which I think is a very good one. Um, we we have at guard. Our optimals are currently 43% on Fox. I might have to hit the lock button on Fox tonight. There's a great game environment, 241.5. 1.3 is a nice multiplier. Um, Buddy Hyde is questionable with illness, so usually those situations are like a 50-50 kind of thing. Um, I think he's a fabulous play, and it could get better as the day goes on. Our optimizer is keying in on some high multiplier guys. We have Malachi Flynn at 1.95 multiplier and OG Anunoby, 64% Terrence Mann. So what do you think? Fox, do you think he's going to improve over the course of the day?
Yeah, I mean, Holmes is doubtful, so it seems unlikely that he will play. So we got a fairly high projection on Whiteside. He is currently expected to slide into the starting lineup. I don't think Holmes being out creates any extra minutes for Fox, but I think we'll just create some extra shot attempts, a little higher usage for Fox. So I think we have boosted his usage just a tiny bit with Holmes out. And if Hield doesn't play, I mean, we saw Fox, I believe, put up a ton of shots recently with Hield out. I forget if it was this most recent game, but he had kind of a Lou Dort-like game in which he took 30 shots in their last game with Hield out and Bagley out. If Hield's out, I mean, I think Fox might be a lock button. We're currently projecting Hield in because I think we, try to be conservative in projecting injury. But I think you could take an aggressive approach at lock. If you don't get news that Hield is in or out, you could take an aggressive approach and kind of lock button Fox, assuming that Hield, might be out. And let's see, that's the late game. So, you do have some pivot options, I think, later in the game, later in the slate, if you want, if Hield somehow gets ruled in, I think you could pivot off, Fox to one of the Washington guards. That game's going to be sick, though. I mean, 241.5 total as of now. Washington and Sacramento are two of the more porous defenses in the league right now, maybe only slightly behind like Minnesota. Washington plays super fast. They're one of the fastest teams in the league right now. I do like that game as a game environment in general. And I think there's going to be value open up for Fox with Holmes already likely to be out and Hield, questionable. You mentioned some of these high multiplier guys in Toronto. Toronto's ruled like not everyone out, but a lot of guys. I mean, they ruled both. Let's see, Van Vliet is serving a suspension. Lowry is out. Gary Trent has been ruled out. DeAndre Bembry has been ruled out. So, I mean, they're really thin on bodies. And Malachi Flynn has, smashed in some of these spots as of late. There's been a handful of games in the last half month or so where some combination or both of Lowry and Van Vliet have been out. And, Yeah, I mean, I didn't really know much about this guy Flynn. I was watching some of his college highlight clips. I mean, he can ball. Like he's a shifty ball handler. Kind of got a Steph Curry feel to him. Looks like a pretty effective shooter. Has range. Can score at the basket. And yeah, I mean, at 2x with the way this Toronto team has been so injury plagued, especially in their backcourt. Flynn and Anunoby should be, I don't know, like half the price that they are tonight. So, we talked a little bit about groups and kind of team limits at the top of the show. On a 9-game slate like tonight, all else equal, assuming that kind of the players who you expect to play are playing, it probably would be a night to set limits of 1 per team. That being said, the injury situations in Toronto and Los Angeles with the Clippers and Sacramento, I think these are going to be some teams that I might be open to going 2 players from these teams.
Or even as thin as Toronto is, it wouldn't be like, I guess, positively crazy to have some lineups with 3 guys. I would think in general you would want to do some Anunoby or Flynn, but Flynn, I guess, is substantially mispriced at 1.95 and would have had a much lower multiplier if pricing had come out after yesterday's game. Because yesterday, with Gary Trent getting 35 minutes, he had a line of 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and 3 steals, I believe. What do you have?
And Lowry played last night, so
2 steals and 22 points. So he blasted last night. No Trent tonight. I think that he is such a smash, and as we've talked about before, you're more inclined to do 2 or 3 players on a team if the multiplier is high. Boucher is our very high variance guy. Not amazing equity today. With the optimizer has him in 7% of lineups, but his performances are almost random, and he's just kind of a good guy to have in tournaments. A scattering of Boucher in tournaments. His minutes have not been impressive lately, but he's a massive per minute producer, and he can get a lot of blocks. So I think a scattering of him is a good idea.
Yeah, definitely. Boucher and Siakam, being the 2 kind of high or low multiplier, expensive, I guess. I always get confused, but the SuperDraft pricing kind of makes you, I don't know, the way I refer to guys as being cheap and expensive doesn't always line up. But yeah, Siakam and Boucher both at 1.3x. Like, to me, if you are allowing 3 Raptors in your lineup, I might be hesitant to allow the combination of Siakam and Boucher, given that they do somewhat similar things on the basketball floor. And they're just kind of the 2 most expensive Raptors. I would be much more open to like 3 Raptors of like Flynn, Anunoby, and 1 of Siakam or Boucher. I don't know. My thinking with 9 games, the likelihood that there are 3 Raptors that are in the top 3 or top 4 at their position, to me, seems unlikely. Would you agree with that sentiment?
3 of them?
Yeah, 3 Raptors all in the top, let's say 3 of their positional category on a 9-game slate.
I think it's possible. Like, I think it's like, I just think Flynn, like, if he puts up 2/3 of his raw score from last night, he's still live to be a top 3 guard. And obviously, if he puts up that line from last night at 1.95 multiplier, he's a smash. He very well could. So his probability is very high. And then Anunoby, I think he's the one he's kind of unlikely to get there. And Boucher and Siakam, it's just they're high variance guys. They're more tournament plays in general. I would say like the odds of all 3 of them getting there is at like 10%-ish or something.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's really there is no kind of like right or wrong answer. I think it's a real decision that people who are using optimizers are going to have to make, because on a 9-game slate where there are a lot of injuries and it appear to be decent value spots opening up. The value is clearly there for three to four Raptors players. I think the difficult decision is going to be, can all those guys achieve their relative ceilings in the same game? I think independently, all 4 of those Raptors that we've discussed are great plays and have reasonably good probabilities of being in the top 3 at their position. But I do think there's kind of some conditional nuance where, like, if Siakam is a top 3 forward, it could kind of hurt the likelihood of, say, like OG being a top 3. I don't know. Something to consider. We'll kind of see how injuries shake out later in the slate or closer to launch.
The guys who, shifting the discussion to tournaments, the guys who, for me, are most unlikely to be in the top 3 are really the high-priced, low multiplier guys. Like, I think for guard, it's pretty unlikely that these guys 1.2 to 1 are in the top 3. Just because for them to beat Flynn is unlikely at 1.95. I think Fox 1.3 is a smash, and then you have a scattering of like good plays in the 1.4 to 6. So I think it's hard for those low multiplier guys to get there. I mean, you have, let's just say, Terrence Mann and Malachi Flynn as being amazing plays. Fox as being an amazing play. And we have Curry. So Curry has a strong multiplier of 1.3. So again, the 1 to 1.2 guys are in trouble because you have so many great high multiplier plays. So Curry and Fox are the first guys that have lowish multipliers 1.3 that I think we're interested in tournaments. And then it's sort of pick your plays at the high multipliers. That's sort of how I see it for tournaments.
Yeah, for sure. I will likely be setting some sort of rule that like takes kind of these pool of low multiplier players. So like definitely the 3 guys 1.05 or lower. So Westbrook, Doncic, and Jokic. I don't want to play more than one of those guys in a lineup. And, I might even extend it to guys in like the 1.2 or lower range. Maybe even 1.25, looking at some of the names in the 1.25 range don't look super appealing. Maybe say, give me no more than 1 player in that top 3 of players, Doncic, Westbrook, and Jokic, and then give me no more than 2 guys in the 1.25 or lower range. It does feel like a lot of the value tonight is in the 1.3 and up range. You touched on Curry. I mean, I think Curry's in an awesome spot. His play is super conducive to SuperDraft scoring, where he gets the 3-point, half point bonus, or half point times 1.3. And OKC, I mean, is a great matchup. They I don't know that they play super up tempo, but they are just a very ineffective defense. Over the last 30 days, they have the highest offensive rating allowed among teams on the slate and have allowed the most points per game among teams on the main SuperDraft slate tonight. So I think Curry's in an awesome spot, and Oubre's out, so he's kind of a high volume player that, in a under normal conditions, maybe would take away shots from Curry. Pascal is not a super voluminous offensive player, but I don't think it's totally inconsequential that some of these guys are out. I think just an awesome matchup for Curry, and I think at 1-3, that continues to be, I think, a good price point for him and Fox as well. So I'm with you with the guys that kind of stand out towards the lower end of the multiplication scale at the guard position.
And at forward, I think we have a lot more volatility. It's much more unpredictable. I think you can scatter your ownership around at forward much more. At guard, we like pretty tight ownership. The plays that we really like. We like Flynn a good bit, Mann a good bit, Fox, Curry. At forward, I think you can really spread it out. I think there's a good bit of variance at play here, and I think the value is somewhat equally dispersed between the low multiplier and the high multiplier guys. Who do you see as, say, the top 2 or 3 forwards on the night?
Yeah, well, I like Terrence Mann a lot. He just, in some of the few Clippers games I've watched, a couple of which have been one of these games where either George or Leonard are out, he just looks sharp. I mean, he can facilitate as a ball handler. He can score. 1.7 to me feels like a good price. That Detroit matchup, I think, is going to be a bit tough. It's not a super strong game environment on a slate where there are, half dozen teams with kind of or half dozen games with a 220 or higher game total, and that game is only down at 216. Could be tough, I think, to fit or to warrant multiple players from the Los Angeles side. But Mann would be a guy that I like a good bit at forward. He's got guard eligibility. Expect him to be pretty popular. Kent Bazemore we've been high on in kind of this absence of Kelly Oubre, so I think we are continuing to stay high on him. He's been getting really good minutes as of late, 35 minutes 2 nights ago, 32 minutes 2 games ago. Like Bazemore a good bit. He can be kind of a low usage player, but I just expect him to get a lot of run with Oubre out. That's kind of been the case over the last 2 games in which Oubre has missed both. So at 2x, I think Bazemore is worth some shots for sure.
So since we do have some forwards that we think are very high value, and the chalk high multiplier forwards are easily the best plays among the high multiplier, I think what might be instructive for people is to go through the low multiplier stars and X guys out that we feel don't have upside. So to recap, we think that the best plays at forward are OG Anunoby, who is high multiplier. We love him. Terrence Mann, who has dual eligibility with guard, and we think is a fantastic play. Marcus Morris on the Clippers, and Bazemore. So we think those are great plays. We also, with Oubre out, have a scattering of Wiggins. The optimizer has him at 6%. He's at 1.4. We have 7% Boucher. We mentioned the situation of Boucher or Siakam. Currently, our optimizer has 11% of Siakam and 7% of Boucher. We recommend an either or there. So then I think it would be instructive for people to go through the the guys that have multipliers between 1 and 1.3 and X guys out who we think do not have a lot of upside. So Doncic is not hitting our optimizer. However, if he does hit 60, if he has a strong game, wouldn't you say that 60 is drawing pretty live to be like a top 3 scorer tonight? Like, I would say 60 points is, I don't know, about a third to be like a top 3 scorer at forward.
I don't know. I could see it being tough. I mean, there's so much, high multiplier plays, and obviously, there's risk with these guys. Anunoby, Mann, Bazemore, Marcus Morris. Of course, these guys have risk. Like, that's why they're high multiplier. But I think there's so many high multiplier plays that, yeah, I mean, sure, you figure, I don't know. We make guys like Mann and Bazemore, Morris as about a coin flip to hit 60, and obviously there's going to be outcomes where any of these guys don't hit 60, but you get enough coin flip guys to hit 60. I have to imagine there will be at least 3 guys that top 60 among guys like Anunoby, Mann, Bazemore, Morris. And there's also, I think, a pretty deep stable of kind of 1.3x, kind of mid tier forwards.
Just guys that every night can have pop, like your DeRozans and just guys that Michael Porter, like guys that can just have pop, but usually don't get there and can get there. Yeah, I'm with you. I think so. You're roughly in line with the idea that 60 is like maybe a third, 30% ish to get in the top 3 for forward.
Yeah. I mean, I think it can. I do think it's a bit of a dog to be a score that warrants top 3 forward.
So that X's out a lot of our guys that are low multiplier. I think with Doncic, it's just he usually garners some ownership. So then we're saying, and our optimizer is saying, that it's sort of a tough parlay that he's probably whatever 20, low 20% to hit 60 raw fantasy points, and we think that hitting 60 is still only gives you a 1/3 probability of being in the top 3. So that's sort of a tough parlay if you're playing Doncic, and he might garner some ownership. So we don't really recommend that. And likewise with Zion, he flashed some upside this year, but he historically has been a very reliable fantasy producer, but not a guy that smashes too often. And New York's a slow matchup. So he, again, is sort of an X out. And then Levine, Orlando is not your explosive matchup. Same idea. Randall would be maybe the first guy that we say could do it, right? Like, because he could. I mean, it's not a great play, but he's not going to have a ton of ownership, and like he has a decent probability of hitting 60 adjusted.
Yeah, and I think Randall has decent access to, say, 70 fantasy points, in the way that, like, for Doncic to get to 70 points, I mean, he's got to have one of these triple-double, 30, 40-point games, which obviously is within the range of outcomes for him. But, it seems kind of a thin likelihood to happen. And even if it does, just given how the slate's looking, I'm not sure that it guarantees him as kind of a required piece for tournaments. Levine, I think, would be a complete X out for me, just given the matchup, given the addition of Vucevic, who's taken away usage from Levine. I think he'd be a clear X. Butler, we are extremely low on, even though he has gotten good minutes. He's kind of lost some usage to some of these other kind of secondary Miami scorers like Hero, Nunn. Oladipo is out tonight, which I think stands to benefit Butler a little bit. But 1.2x. I think, I'm far more interested in a guy like Randall. We're very high on Sabonis at 1.25x as a guy kind of just moving up a little bit. And
Turner in right now?
what's that?
Do we have Turner in?
Yeah, I think let me check. Yes, we do have Turner in. So I think that projection for Sabonis would only jump even more if Turner is ruled out. Turner has missed, the past 3 games, and Sabonis has gone 33, 30, and 37 minutes. So I think if Turner's out, and I mean, he can achieve those minute totals even if Turner plays. But yeah, I mean, I think he's a lock to hit 35 minutes if Turner gets ruled out. I think a decent matchup for him. So yeah, we like Sabonis a good bit. Houston is, a pretty weak defense, pretty up tempo. Surprisingly, only a 4.5 point spread, which Houston, I think, is a team to have concern about blowout risk in games they're playing, but the Vegas line would suggest that there's not a ton of blowout risk here in this game. So I like Sabonis a good bit.
And then our optimizer also likes Porzingis at a strong multiplier.
Yep.
We like him a decent bit at 1.3.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I think draws a good matchup with Memphis. He's got I think good upside given his ability to block shots, and score threes. He has like 2 traits that I think play up on SuperDraft are the block shots and steals, which take the 3-point valuation of FanDuel. But then they also give you double and 3-point bonus, which takes the valuation from DraftKings. And like Porzingis just does all those things well. He can block shots, he can make threes, he can get double-figure rebounds. So I think he's one of these guys that if you are using like DraftKings or FanDuel projections in an optimizer or for hand building lineups, I think you're kind of going to be undervaluing a guy like Porzingis because he brings value in really 2 or 3 traits that are highly rewarded on SuperDraft.
So at center, we might have a very tight conversation tonight because if Holmes is out, then Whiteside at 1.95 is super strong. And we've already mentioned Sabonis and Porzingis as good plays that have forward and center eligibility, and we think Randall is an okay play. So, I mean, the center conversation might be that tight, right?
Yeah, and I think there's potential for Whiteside to fade from that conversation a little bit. And early this morning, I think the RotoWire expectation was that Whiteside would start at center. Now I'm seeing they have Damian Jones is the projected starter, and Whiteside has been one of those guys over the past couple of years that teams just seem to not like playing a bunch. He also does get into foul trouble a decent bit. So if Whiteside isn't announced as the starter for Sacramento, I think I have a lot less interest in playing him. Because I do think they're like if he's starting, it seems very likely that he'll get minutes in kind of the low to mid 20s, but I could see paths to him coming off the bench and getting only like 16 or 18 minutes, and that's going to be tough. I know 1.8 is a good multiplier on him, and he is very productive per minute, but I think it'd be tough for him to pay off a 1.8 multiplier if he's only getting 18 minutes or so.
But if Jones is the starter, he's not an absolute lock even at the 2 multiplier. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. My sense with him is that he is low usage. I can pull up some of his charts. I mean, even when he was like with LA, playing kind of backup center roles, I mean, he's taken no more than 3 shots in a game this year. And if he does start, he hasn't been in a game that is has maybe this much role opportunity for him. But I mean, his rebound rates aren't particularly great. doesn't. His rebound rate is typically kind of around 10%. Like if he was around 15%, like with some of the stronger rebounders, I would be a little hesitant. Does seem to be an effective shot blocker. He's got some spikes where he's got like 10% or so block rate. So maybe there's some value there, but yeah, I'll have to see if kind of we update close to lock minutes going Jones' way as opposed to Whiteside. But I would guess he probably will not be in play in a super big way.
Yeah, so if Jones is the starter, then center is somewhat open because like it will be the type of night where you just want guys that have the possibility of getting to 65-ish super draft points, and that is a somewhat lively conversation. We like Sabonis and Porzingis a lot. We like Randall a little bit. Boucher is in there for a scattering. Yeah, I think those would be the most likely people to get there. And Whiteside, I mean, even if he doesn't start, you could take a scattering there just on the off shot that he gets 25 minutes.
Yeah, sure. I think there are paths to him getting decent run off the bench. It's just I don't know. I have less confidence, I guess, in him playing 23 minutes off the bench compared to 23 minutes off as a starter.
Yeah. It's interesting your comment about teams not loving to play him. I wonder, he has had a very interesting trajectory. He possibly got a big head when he was in Miami, and he was briefly among the center stars of the NBA. It was always an unlikely trajectory for someone to just show up and start posting big numbers in their late 20s. And it, in retrospect, was just kind of a fluke. I mean, yeah. Right. Like he was substantially overrated in his late 20s.
Yeah. I mean, he put
up in Miami, like he was posting some stats that were star stats, and it didn't make a lot of sense at the time. And like, I don't know. I do think that he started to see himself as one of the top centers in the league, and it just wasn't really true. He was an old school center, and he wasn't that amazing at that role. So,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, even in Portland, when Nurkic was kind of consistently in and out of the lineup, I mean, it's not like you would have figured that would have been an opportunity for him to really shine when Nurkic was kind of constantly injured. But he just never like really got a ton of opportunity. And Sacramento's kind of been the same way with him. They have had far more preference for when healthy Holmes or Bagley. They got this guy, I don't know how to say his first name, but Metu, who's kind of a forward center hybrid that they like playing him just as much as they do Whiteside. So yeah, I would want to see Whiteside announced as the starter before I have a ton of confidence in him. I think he could be worth a sprinkle if he's coming off the bench, but I think will be a less crucial part of my lineups if he's announced to come off the bench.
All right. Well, that will do it for today. We will be back on Friday, and then no session tomorrow, but we'll be back on Friday.